Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the dustiest corners of ancient Rome, not for a grand battle, not for an emperor's rise, but for the slow, gritty life of a floor sweeper between sand refills. The streets smell like olive oil and tired leather. Your tunic sticks to your back, and just outside the threshold of a cramped taberna, one of those noisy Roman snack shops with wine, bread, and people who never tip, you're already reaching into your worn linen pouch for a handful of sand. The day has barely started, and here you are, performing one of the least celebrated jobs in the empire. The floor's a mosaic of tiny stones, pretty from far away, but slippery up close, especially after 30 drunk tradesmen stomped in last night with grape juice, muddy boots, and a half-eaten eel. Your job is simple in theory. Sprinkle fresh sand on the floor to absorb mess, prevent slips, and make things look slightly less revolting than they are. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love knowing who's drifting off with me all around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You scatter the first layer of sand with a flick of your hand. Not too thick, it's not a beach. Not too thin. It's not worth your boss yelling again. It's coarse stuff, scraped from the banks of the Tiber and sifted through old linen sacks. Historians still argue whether fine white sand from Egypt was ever used indoors for premium venues, or if that's just romantic nonsense from poets with soft hands. But here, this is gritty, gray, and full of twigs. The moment it hits the mosaic, the sound shifts. The room seems quieter, the footsteps duller. Roman shopkeepers prized that. A sand-covered floor didn't just hide dirt, it sounded polite. Behind you, the innkeeper, Lucius, big voice, bigger belly, yells something about a sticky patch near the brazier. You sigh. It's going to be one of those mornings. You trudge toward the mess. There it is. Wine or blood? You can't tell anymore. Might be both. You've learned not to ask. It's soaked into the grout between tiles, forming a slow crust. You loosen it with a dry broom made of bundled twigs, then sweep in wide arcs, dragging the debris to the doorway. Sometimes, when the floor is too slick for sand, your backup is sawdust, rare, expensive, and weirdly festive, like you're sweeping up after a party you weren't invited to. But most days, it's just sand. Always sand. A passing customer chuckles, then mutters, "Wish I had your job." Looks easy. You don't answer. You've heard that joke more times than the temple bells at noon. By now, the sun's climbing. Shafts of light spill through the smoke hole above the grill, illuminating every tiny dust mote you just stirred up. It's beautiful, in a grimy, hopeless sort of way. You pause to watch them float, like 1,000 tiny soldiers caught in formation. Then Lucius snaps his fingers. Back to it. The smell of stale onions and overcooked fish hangs in the air. You try not to breathe too deeply. The taberna's walls are covered in crude painted menus, salted snails, garum-drenched cabbage, lentil stew that tastes like regret. People eat standing up, spill constantly, and never say thank you. Still, the sand keeps things semi-presentable. Roman writers even mentioned it in their manuals. A clean floor shows dignity, no matter how bad the food tastes. The funny part, the floor isn't just a place to walk. It's a kind of social bulletin board. You start noticing patterns: how rich patrons always pace in perfect lines, how flustered messengers scuff in circles, how flirtations between regulars play out in toe traces and heel pivots. And then there's the game. Not an official one, just something you and the other sweepers invented. You try to guess who spilled what, just by the footprint trail. Sticky drag marks. Probably that wool seller with the bad knee. Sharp heel dents in the corner. Lucius's daughter sneaking in again to flirt with the baker's son. There's a particular elegance to watching the day build itself in sand, like calligraphy. No one taught you to read. And just when you start to appreciate the art of it all, someone vomits in the corner. A quick reflex. You're already there with a fresh scoop of sand, pretending not to smell it, pretending not to care. Another customer calls out, "Hey, sweet boy, you missed a spot." You resist the urge to respond in Greek, something vulgar you learned from the docks. Historians still debate whether Roman sweepers had a formal pay scale or if they earned by the handful, like musicians begging at the baths. In reality, it didn't matter. You got fed. Sometimes, you got sandals, occasionally, and most of all, you got to keep sweeping while other people argued about taxes and lineage. That, weirdly, felt like a kind of freedom. You take one last pass near the front door. The breeze outside smells like street meat and wet wool. A cart rolls past, wheels shrieking, trailing donkey poop in its wake. You sigh again. Give it 10 minutes and the floor will be dirty again. But for now, it's smooth, quiet, and clean enough to trick the eye. You lean your broom against the doorway frame, just for a moment, and press your back against the warm stone. Inside, the hum of voices rises and falls like a lazy tide. You're not really resting, you're listening. Because here's the thing about floor sweeping in Rome, it's not just a job, it's surveillance. You're the invisible audience to every whispered trade deal, every hissed affair, every badly whispered insult that someone thinks the cook didn't hear. You know more secrets than a priest. Take Claudia, for example, the butcher's wife who pretends she doesn't know how money works. You watched her drop a coin behind the wine barrel last week and accidentally find it when the tax collector was around. Or that bald guy in the red tunic who keeps showing up to just check the ledgers. He's not here for ledgers. He's here for Lucius's cousin, who has a laugh like a wine jug tipping over and a habit of slipping love notes behind the counter. And you, with your broom and your bucket of sand, are the only one who sees it all. There's something odd about the layout of this place: narrow aisles, crooked benches, and always that one broken tile near the hearth. If someone steps on it just right, it clicks. You've counted 4 arguments that started with a stumble on that thing. No one notices but you. It's your private trigger, your cue to pause sweeping and tune in. Right now, there's a group of grain merchants crowded around the back table. Their robes are too clean. Their sandals are too quiet. That means they're hiding something. One of them whispers in Greek, a language you half understand. You catch the word election, maybe medicine, maybe poison. Hard to say. Historians still argue whether local sweepers understood the many dialects in circulation, or if they simply got good at reading tone, like a dog knowing when it's about to be kicked. A woman rushes in next, hair wild, toga misbuttoned. She scans the room like she's late for something or fleeing from it. You barely blink. You've seen worse. You casually shuffle some sand toward the mess she just dragged in, nod once, and go back to pretending you're invisible, which, in Rome, you mostly are. Floor sweepers weren't honored. You weren't mentioned in epics. You weren't sculpted in marble, unless you count the background of a market scene mosaic where someone stooped over, halfway blurred by time, and yet your presence meant everything. Without you, the floor turned to sludge. Customers slipped. Chaos crept in. Some shopkeepers respected that. They'd slip you a crust of bread or a half cup of wine left behind by a merchant too drunk to notice. Others, not so much. One time, a senator's aide kicked your broom across the floor and laughed about training slaves with whips, not twigs. You still remember the sound the broom made as it bounced off the counter sharp. Final. That's the thing about sweeping. It's not just sand, it's memory. You work the front now, tracing a curved path that follows the edge of the room. You've done it so many times, your feet know it better than your eyes do. The sand moves like dry snow gathering in corners, clinging to damp spots, muffling the world. Sometimes, if you stare too long, you swear you can read the arguments from last night in the swirl patterns. Someone threw a plate near the oven, that curved arc of soot tells you so. A spilled amphora rolled toward the door. The smear in the sand still points like an arrow. Maybe that's just your tired brain making stories. Or maybe you've been here too long. But then again, so has the broom. You inherited it from another sweeper, Marius, who disappeared one day and left nothing behind but this splintered handle and a few jokes no one else remembers. You swear the broom has a bend in it, like it knows to sweep clockwise even when you don't guide it. It's got personality. You'd name it if that weren't too tragic to admit out loud. Back inside, Lucius is arguing with a customer about overcooked lentils. You let the sand cover your footsteps as you inch closer. Not to eavesdrop, of course. Just acoustics, I said. The lentils were undercooked. Not over. You said over this morning. That was a different pot. Sir? Well, I don't care if it came from Juno's armpit. It tasted like chalk. You cover a smirk with your sleeve. These are the moments you live for, not because they matter, but because they replay, like a comedy troupe stuck on repeat. Floor sweepers, believe it or not, are the only people who never leave during these scenes. Everyone else walks away. You clean around it, memorize the cadence, and use it later to entertain your fellow sweepers during break, which, by the way, is never actually a break. You don't get scheduled time off. You just decide when the shouting is loud enough that no one will miss you for 10 minutes. Sometimes, when the day is quiet, you let your mind drift to other cities. Alexandria with its libraries, Athens with its philosophers, Carthage with its spices. But deep down, you know those places have floors too. Floors get dirty, and someone always has to sweep them. Historians still debate whether sweeping was ever a pathway to promotion, whether someone like you could ever rise to manage the cleaning staff in a villa, maybe even supervise the polishing of imported marble. You've heard stories, probably myths. Still, they keep your hands moving. The sun slants lower now, throwing long bars of light across the room. Each patch of sand glows differently, some golden, some gray, some the color of tired teeth. You drag your broom along a groove, letting the bristles catch every little truth the day has dropped behind. In this moment, you realize the real mess isn't what's spilled, it's what's spoken. And you're the only one sweeping it up. You step outside and immediately regret it. The smell hits you first: fermented fish, wet straw, donkey droppings, and whatever died behind the olive stand 3 days ago and still hasn't been discovered. The Romans might be brilliant at aqueducts, but their streets, not so much. You pull your tunic up over your nose and kick at a broken amphora rolling underfoot. Crushed garum jars are like the landmines of Roman street sweeping, sharp, stinky, and guaranteed to ruin your afternoon. Out here, the broom doesn't stand a chance. So instead, it's the wide wooden scraper, a flat slab tied to a stick, meant to shove things rather than sweep them. You give the sand bucket a little shake, nearly empty. Again, it's a running joke among your kind. More sand than dignity, but never enough of either. You trail behind a cart with a cracked axle that's leaking flour, like it's shedding weight for a race. You follow the trail down to the crossroads, where the midday market crowd clogs every exit and entrance. Your job: clear the path between the bakery and the butcher before the sandal stampede begins again. You brace your shoulder against the scraper and shove. The sound is awful. Sand, slush, bits of cabbage leaf, and something definitely once alive all slide into a slimy pile. A few people glance over. No one offers help. A woman with a parrot in a cage steps right through the spot you just cleared. The parrot coughs. You're not sure if it's sick or just mocking you. Probably both. Here's the thing. You could sweep inside all day and at least feel semi-human. Out here, you're part of the filth, and the street's never just dirt. It's a cocktail of clay, animal urine, oil slicks, and shredded fig leaves. Historians still argue whether streets were cleaned by dedicated crews or if low-ranking shop staff like you were expected to do your part. You already know the answer. You're doing your part alone. You pause beside a public fountain. There's a man snoring on the steps, cradling a flute and a jug. A monkey picks through his satchel. You wonder if the monkey pays taxes. Then you remember you don't pay taxes either. That's something. A vendor yells at you. Watch it. As if you personally summoned the wind that blew his date palm leaves across the square. You wave an apology and keep scraping. Behind you, your sand trail disappears in seconds, trampled by bare feet and hoof prints and that one guy who refuses to wear shoes because the gods want his souls closer to the earth. Yeah, the gods also want you to stop dragging mud through the doorway. Sir, back near the taberna. You switch tools again, broom in hand, lighter now with half the bristles worn down like old teeth. You start resanding the entry path. It's not ceremonial. It's not sacred. It's just practical. The sand helps grip the soles of sandals slick with spilled oil or fresh fig juice. But you like to pretend it's more than that. You like to imagine you're sketching stories into the earth that only you can read. A boy runs past, kicks up a puff of dust, and keeps going. That's the other thing about working outside. You're invisible unless you're in the way. Still, you notice things, like how different types of footsteps sound in sand. Light skips from children, heavy heel strikes from soldiers, nervous toe taps from guilty husbands. You've begun collecting them in your head, as if each person has a musical signature. only your ears are trained to hear. You duck into an alley briefly, mostly to breathe. It's quieter here. Damp. Smells like old bread and hope. You take a deep breath and count to 5. Then, just for fun, you draw a spiral in the patch of untouched sand. It'll be gone in minutes. But you saw it, and that's enough. Someone once told you that the best sand for sweeping came from crushed marble. Expensive stuff, bright white, smooth like flour, only used in temples and high-end bathhouses. You've never touched it. Your sand is gritty, full of tiny pebbles, and suspiciously full of tiny beetles. But it works. That's what matters. Historians still argue whether sand sweeping was more about hygiene or ceremony. Was it meant to absorb grease? To signal cleanliness? To just look like someone cared? You think it's all 3 or none. Or maybe it started for one reason and continued out of habit. Like so much in Rome, you hear Lucius shouting again from inside. You give the street one final pass, just enough to hide the worst of the mess, then drag your bucket back in. Someone's knocked over the brazier again. You sigh, you pick up the broom, and you start all over. You slip into the bathhouse just as the steam breathes across the threshold like a lazy ghost. The floor here is different. No crushed garum jars, no donkey slush, no drunken parrot sellers stepping on your toes. But don't get too comfortable. If the taverna was a chaos of crumbs and curses, the bathhouse is a battlefield of slipperiness and ego. The first thing you notice is the floor itself. Not smooth, never smooth. The Romans, ever obsessed with traction and decorum, embedded small tiles into complex geometric mosaics. They even tossed crushed terracotta shards into the mortar, just to give the soles of bare feet something to grip. And still, people fall. You glance over and see the remains of a recent tumble, someone's towel, abandoned mid-roll. A chipped oil flask, a long smear across the floor that says, "I slipped, I screamed, and I blame the staff," which, of course, means you tighten your grip on the broom. It's sand duty again, though, in here. It's a trickier blend. Too much, and it scratches the tiles. Too little, and someone breaks a hip. You're expected to read the room. Like a poet with no paper, there's always someone watching. A bath attendant with arms like temple columns eyes your bucket, nods once, and disappears through the steam. You step forward, testing the tiles beneath your own feet. The warmth rises up through the soles, almost enough to forget you're here to work. Almost. You begin your careful sweep not in arcs like at the taberna, but in short, straight lines, brushing sand into corners, down channels, into the places where sweat and oil collect like gossip. Speaking of gossip, oh, there's plenty. The bathhouse is where secrets soak. You pass by 2 merchants whispering behind a marble pillar, both red-faced and pretending to stretch. One is talking about a land dispute outside of Capua. The other says something about a missing slave and a broken cart. Neither sees you. That's the point. They think of you as scenery, like a statue, like steam. And yet, you hear it all. There's a senator in the corner with knees too knobby for his status, demanding fresh oil and frowning at his reflection in the water. A scholar is scribbling on a wax tablet, while a masseur works oil into his back, muttering about those damned Alexandrians. Someone sneezes, and a nearby woman insists it's the bad air, not a curse. You sweep through them like a breeze. Historians still argue whether bathhouses had permanent cleaning staff or rotated workers from affiliated households. You'd argue that you are both. You've been borrowed by your taberna boss so many times it might be legal slavery by now. But who's keeping track? You reach the edge of the caldarium, the hot room where the sweat smells richer, almost spiced, like eucalyptus soaked in regret. The tiles here are darker, slicker, etched with mineral trails. You scatter a fresh layer of sand along the lip of the plunge pool, careful not to let it fall in. It always falls in, and when it does, you get blamed for muddying the waters of Mars. Yes, that's what they said last week. Apparently, everything in Rome needs to be connected to a god, even sand. One older man slaps the shoulder of another, laughs loudly, and then immediately slips, landing with the kind of thud that stops conversation for 10 full seconds. You freeze. Everyone turns. He grunts, waves a hand, insists he's fine, but you already know what's coming. A bath attendant storms toward you, jabbing a thick finger. More sand. He growls, "Don't let that happen again." Of course. not the old man's wet feet, or the soap he spilled trying to show off. No, it's your fault. The sand whisperer. You obediently fetch another scoop from your pouch, dusting the floor like a timid snowstorm. No one thanks you, but they walk easier now. They always do. There's a fringe belief barely mentioned in literature that certain bathhouses hired floor artists, people who made designs in the sand while sweeping. Little loops, fan shapes, meandering lines like waves. Historians call it apocryphal, but sometimes, when no one's watching, you do it anyway, just a flourish. A swirl here, a knee-stead circle there. It disappears in moments, under heels and wet feet, but for those few seconds, it's yours. You rest briefly near the hypocaust vent, where warm air rises through the floor tiles from the furnace below. The hum soothes your sore knees. You imagine what it would be like to work under the floor instead. One of those sweaty laborers stoking fires, crawling between brick pillars, coughing on ash. Somehow, you feel luckier, but not by much. A woman walks by with her sandals in her hand, complaining about the coarse bits in the sand. She says she prefers the imported kind, the one that feels like flour, not gravel. You want to tell her that her precious flour sand comes with flea eggs, but you nod politely, as if you'll pass the message to the Sand Quality Control Council, which does not exist. You finish your round with a clean trail through the frigidarium, where the cold makes your fingers ache. The floor here sparkles with condensation. You spread just enough sand to make it safe, but not so much that it turns to slush. And just as you finish, the man from earlier, yes, the one who fell, slips again on his way out. He yells. You wince. Somewhere, a bathhouse. God rolls their eyes. You duck through the side arch of the bathhouse and step into the narrow courtyard beyond. The light hits different here, golden, filtered through linen awnings and dust. You stop for a moment, eyes adjusting, lungs pulling in air that doesn't reek of foot oil and boiled sweat. For the first time today, your hands hang loose at your sides. You think about sitting down, but you don't. Because the moment you stop moving, someone will see you not moving. And in Rome, that's the fastest way to earn more work. Your broom slumps against your shoulder like it's tired too. You carry it into the side passage behind the kitchens there. Wedged between stacked amphorae and discarded bricks is where the other sweepers sometimes linger. Not hiding, just breathing. You're not alone in this city of sand. There's Fabius, who's been sweeping floors since the old emperor died. He hums a song no one remembers and always smells faintly of bay leaves. There's Manius, who claims he once swept the floor of the Temple of Saturn and saw a senator's mistress drop a silver comb. He says he still has it. You don't believe him, but he tells the story well. And then there's Livia, yes. Women sweep too, especially in the merchant alleys where men complain less when they're scolded by someone's aunt. She sharpens the ends of her broom bristles with a knife, just for the satisfaction of watching dirt fear her. You lean against a sun-warmed wall, passing around a heel of barley bread that tastes like it forgot to rise. It crumbles before it reaches your mouth. No matter. Your stomach accepts anything at this hour. Someone jokes, "What do floor sweepers pray for?" Fabius answers without blinking. Sand that refills itself, and customers who hover. Everyone laughs. Not too loudly. Don't want to be heard enjoying yourself. Here in the back, away from the footprints and orders and spilled wine, you have a few seconds of shared invisibility. You compare bruises. You tease Livia about her chalky elbows. She teases you about the time you accidentally sanded a priest's ceremonial cloak. It looked like a rug. You mutter, "It smelled like one too." She shoots back. Historians still argue whether low-tier domestic workers had distinct subcultures slang, hand signals, hidden traditions. You don't need to argue. You live it. There's a nod you give when someone's covered for you. A double click of the broom on stone means watch out. The owner's coming. A slow, silent sweep across a clean floor. That means, let me stay lost in my thoughts just a little longer. But the silence doesn't last. A bell rings twice. Somewhere, someone important wants something cleaned. Urgently. They always do. You sling the bucket back onto your hip. It thumps like a heartbeat. The sun is higher now. You can feel it burning against the back of your neck. No shade today, not until dusk. You march back into the side hallway, feet tracing the same path you walked 2 hours ago, like a chalk drawing that keeps being redrawn. You pass two servants arguing about a broken amphora, one of them holding to the handle like it's a severed limb. You nod. They ignore you. That's fine. Back at the threshold of the main room, you pause. It's all been trampled again. You could swear you just swept it. Maybe you did, but there are no footprints now that you recognize. Just new ones, layered deep. Like memory stacked on memory, you flick some fresh sand onto the worst of it. Your mind wanders as you sweep. You think about your old friend Gaius, who left Rome for a farm outside Arretium, said he was going to make peace with chickens, sent a letter once, misspelled your name. But you still keep it tucked in your sandal strap. Even though the ink's run in the corner smells like vinegar, you think about your mother, who swept floors in the temple when you were little. She used to say, "It's not about making it clean, it's about making it look like you tried." You didn't understand it then. You do now. There's another joke among sweepers. If you can't hide the dirt, make it artistic. That's why Manius sometimes drags his broom in lazy arcs that look suspiciously like laurels. It's also why you once made a fish in the sand near the bakery. A customer noticed, said it reminded him of the sea, bought 3 loaves. You got an extra crust that day. You pause near the edge of the inner courtyard, just in time to see a senator's son toss a fig at a dog and miss. It splatters against a pillar. He doesn't even look, just laughs and walks away. The dog eats the fig. You sigh, not for the mess, but for the pattern. You already know exactly how it'll smear, how it'll cling to the grout, how long it'll take you to scrub out with your sleeve and a prayer. The courtyard tiles gleam where sunlight hits them orange. Cream. A soft, dusty blue. Someone paid an artisan for those stones. Someone else paid to have them installed. You're just the one making sure nobody notices how filthy they get. The breeze picks up. A few petals tumble across the stones from a nearby garland. You sweep around them, not through them. Some messes are meant to be left untouched. You move on. The moment you walk into the kitchen courtyard, your nose wrinkles. You don't even need to see the mess yet. You can smell it. Something sharp and sour is riding the warm air like a warning. You know that smell. Everyone in Rome knows that smell. Garum, fish sauce, or, as you privately call it, liquid regret. You round the corner and there it is, a shattered amphora of garum, exploded against the tiles like a culinary crime scene. Viscous brown trails snake through the grout. Chunks of fermented fish cling to the walls, and a splatter has reached almost 5 feet up the side of the grain bin. You blink. Impressive. A panicked cook stands nearby with both hands on his cheeks, like a man watching his family drown. "It tipped over," he mutters, eyes wide. "I barely touched it." You resist the urge to clap slowly. Instead, you just nod, because nothing about this day has earned surprise anymore. You set your sand bucket down with a quiet thunk. Don't use just sand. The cook stammers, it's too oily. You need a charcoal and lettuce. Definitely lettuce. You turn to him slowly. "Lettuce!" He nods solemnly, like he's handing you sacred wisdom. It draws out the smell. Historians still argue whether Romans used plants like lettuce or mint to clean up kitchen spills, or if that's a garbled misunderstanding of herbal offerings meant for altars. Either way, this man clearly believes in the divine power of vegetables. So you humor him. You glance around the kitchen until you find a crate of withered lettuce leaves. They look like they've lost the will to live. You grab a few anyway and toss them gently over the puddle like you're laying flowers at a grave. The cook nods, pleased. "Good, that'll fix it." It absolutely will not fix it. Next, you fetch a small bucket of crushed charcoal from the hearth pile, a trick you actually believe in. The grit helps absorb the oil and breaks up the smell enough that you can pretend you're not standing in a fish sauce swamp. You scatter the charcoal, then add a cautious sprinkle of sand. The mixture fizzes faintly, hissing, like a very small, very unhappy snake. You work fast, scraping the worst of the mess toward a floor drain. Every stroke of your broom pulls more sludge from the grout. You can feel the bristles dying in real time. This was a new broom. Somewhere behind you, the cook starts mumbling a prayer to Mercury. "Not for your soul, for the sauce." He says that was imported from Hispania. 8 silver coins. You almost feel bad for him. Almost. You pause to wipe your sleeve across your forehead. The sweat mixes with the smell, and for a moment, you imagine what your own funeral would be like. probably held in a side alley, probably smells like this. You glance up and realize something unexpected. People are watching you. Two kitchen boys and a servant girl have stopped to stare. Maybe it's the rhythm of your sweep. Maybe it's the way the mess is slowly transforming back into a floor. Maybe it's just morbid curiosity, but they're transfixed. You resist the urge to bow. Instead, you flick your wrist in a wide arc, sweeping the final swirl of lettuce charcoal sludge toward the drain. It disappears with a satisfying plop. The cook exhales. He looks at you like you just saved his child from a fire. You nod once. Cool. Professional. Covered in fish guts. A few minutes later, you're alone again. That's always how it goes. You rinse your broom in a bucket of gray water and try not to think about where it came from. You lean against the wall, breathing slowly, letting your arms dangle. For a moment, you imagine you're not a floor sweeper at all. You're an architect, a sculptor, someone who builds order from chaos. Even if the chaos smells like old anchovies, you let your eyes drift across the now clean kitchen floor. It's not perfect. It never is. But it's safe again, walkable, pretendable. That's the real job, isn't it? You don't erase the mess. You just hide it enough that people feel okay pretending it never happened. That's Rome. Really, a world built on cover-ups, ceremonial brooms, and strategically placed lettuce. You step outside again. Blinking against the afternoon light, a breeze cuts through the alley, and for once, it's not laced with fish rot. You stretch your arms overhead. Bones pop like olive pits. Somewhere in the city, a bell tolls, marking the hour. You check your bucket. Still enough sand for another round. You head back toward the main road, broom in hand, shoulders square. The garum mess is gone. The cook will take credit for rescuing the floor. The senator's son will probably slip in the bathhouse again. You'll be blamed. Again. But right now you walk a stretch of clean tile that you made clean. No one will thank you for it. No one will even notice. But you will, and that's something. You're barely halfway across the forum when the message reaches you, delivered by a scrawny boy in a red sash, puffing like he just sprinted from Gaul. He skids to a stop in front of you, one sandal missing, the other tied on with twine, and wheezes out, Patrician Villa, East Hill. Special request. Bring sand. You blink. What kind of sand? He just shrugs and bolts off again, already carrying the next mysterious errand like a sweaty little Mercury. You sigh. East Hill. You know that hill. You know the family too, the Sabinuses. Old money. The kind of money that still wears purple trim to breakfast. The kind of people who think sweeping is a form of public theater. And when they request sand, they don't mean clean up the vomit by the garden bench. They mean make the floor look like a mosaic. Using grains of crushed rock, you begin the climb with your broom over one shoulder, sand bucket sloshing softly, and the sun leaning hard on your neck. The roads grow quieter the higher you go. Fewer donkeys, more potted fig trees, terracotta rooftops shaped like smug little hats. By the time you reach the villa gate, you're already sweating through your tunic. A servant girl lets you in with a raised brow, like she wasn't expecting you to show up. You the sand boy? You nod. Sandman, actually. But sure. She leads you into the atrium open sky. Tinkling fountain. Birds that look too clean to be real. The floors already clean. Of course. No mess here, just a request. In the center of the room is the client, Marcus Sabinus the Elder, reclined on a couch that probably cost more than your entire street. His hair is curled. His robe is imported. He's sipping wine that's older than you. He gestures to the floor with a lazy hand. I want something nice. A spiral. Maybe a dolphin. I leave the details to your artistic instincts. You blink again. In sand. He smiles indulgently. Yes, crushed coral sand. From Brundisium. Should be in the bag. He points to a pouch near the pillar. You peek inside. It's the softest, palest sand you've ever seen, almost pink. Like powdered marble. Definitely not the kind that absorbs garum. Definitely not meant for cleaning. This is for show. You kneel carefully, then pour a palmful of sand onto the mosaic tiles. It fans out in a delicate mound. The grains sparkle. Somewhere nearby, a lyre player plucks notes you suspect are meant to inspire you. Instead, they just make you sleepy. you begin. First, a spiral, slow, deliberate, dragging a thin reed through the grains to carve a single, smooth line that coils inward like a snail's shell. Then a branching tail, like waves, like curling vines. You glance up. Marcus is watching, head tilted slightly. He nods once. You keep going. Next, a dolphin. It's barely a suggestion, 2 curves for the back and belly, a little dip for the nose. No detail, just shape. It won't last an hour. One gust of wind and your masterpiece will vanish, like it was never there. But maybe that's the point. Historians still debate whether these sand mosaics were a common decorative practice or a rare indulgence by bored nobles with too much time and not enough floors. You're living proof they existed, at least for the next few minutes. When you finish, Marcus claps his hands once. Beautiful, he says. Elegant. You've outdone yourself. You don't correct him by pointing out this is your first time. You just bow slightly and begin backing away. Wait, he says. One last thing. He reaches beside him and flicks a silver coin towards you. You catch it. It's warm from the sun and heavier than it needs to be. Next time, he adds, I'd like a centaur. With wings. You nod. Of course he does. You leave the atrium quietly, careful not to breathe too hard. The sand trail fades behind you with each step. Outside, the servant girl raises an eyebrow. He liked it. You hold up the coin. She whistles. Maybe I should start sweeping. You grin. Only if you know how to draw winged centaurs with fishtails. She wrinkles her nose. Too many tails. You trudge back down the hill, coin tucked into your belt, hands crusted with coral dust. You should be annoyed, but for some reason, you're not. Because for a brief moment, someone treated your sand as art. Not mess, not function, just form. Even if they forgot it existed 10 minutes later. You didn't. And if you squint just right as the breeze kicks up behind you, you can almost imagine that dolphin tail still dancing across the villa floor. You reach the bottom of the hill just as the sun decides to turn your scalp into roasted barley. The wind has died. The streets are sticky with heat. The kind of stillness that makes dogs stretch out like spilled laundry, and even the pickpockets get sluggish. You follow a back alley toward the quieter part of the forum, the spot where floor sweepers, washerwomen, and market kids gather for breaks that aren't officially sanctioned but universally respected. It's shaded by an old fig tree, the kind that drops just enough overripe fruit to keep you on your toes. Literally, Manius is already there, lying flat on the ground, arms out like he's been sacrificed to some minor household deity. His broom is under his head, and he's got a single grape stuck to his cheek. He looks content. Livia's crouched against the wall, scraping something unidentifiable off her sandal with a piece of broken amphora. She looks less content. You slide down beside them, groaning theatrically, centaur with wings. You say, they both look at you. Livia, Sabinus. You nod. Manius. Did you do it? You shake your head. Started with a dolphin. Got a coin. He whistles. Rich people. You could hand them a pile of dirt shaped like a bean, and they'd call it genius. You pull a crust of bread from your pouch, hard as a senator's heart, but still edible. You split it 3 ways. The ritual is unspoken. Whoever gets coin shares the next meal. It's not about fairness. It's about not going mad alone. You lean back, staring at the canopy of fig leaves above. They quiver slightly. Somewhere nearby, someone's playing pipes. Badly. You ever think about quitting? You murmur. Livia snorts. To do what? Open a scroll shop. Become an empress. Sell sand. Manius offers, eyes closed. Good sand. Real luxury grains. We market it as imported from the moon. You laugh. It feels strange in your throat. Dusty. There's a quiet comfort in this little patch of shade. No one yelling. No garum jars. No senators slipping on their egos. Just the warmth of shared aches and the knowledge that everyone here has swept something vile and lived to tell the tale. You compare calluses. You tell stories. You joke about the time a magistrate tracked goat dung across the temple of Concord and tried to blame it on divine punishment. You mock Lucius's voice. You call that clean? I've seen tidier vomit. You impersonate rich patrons in their worst moments. Is this sawdust? My feet are allergic to pine. Historians still argue whether these Low-status workers formed informal guilds or unions. But you know what this is. It's the next best thing. It's a moment of shared air. You wipe your hands on your tunic and let your head tilt back. Eyes closed now, breathing slower. The city softens a bit around the edges, but the moment never lasts long. A bell rings in the distance. The merchant stalls will reopen soon. Patrons will return from their naps. And someone, probably Lucius, will realize you've been gone longer than usual. You groan as you sit up. Back to it. Livia stretches, arms cracking. You going to draw more dolphins? Maybe a centaur. Maybe just a spiral. Manius opens one eye. Maybe nothing. Maybe just sand that doesn't stick to your teeth. You chuckle, grabbing your broom and sling bucket. As you walk back into the daylight, your mind starts working again. What needs resanding? Who's likely to spill next? Whether you'll have enough to finish the day. But you carry something else. 2. The echo of laughter. The ghost of camaraderie. And the taste of slightly sour barley bread that somehow, in that moment, felt like a feast. The alley gives way to the open square. You blink at the brightness. A little girl runs past with a fig in one hand and someone's coin purse in the other. You don't intervene. You're not in the justice business. You're in the dirt business. Back at the taberna, the doorway's already tracked over again. Of course it is. A wet heel smear, a crushed fig leaf, a trail of something that might be wine or might be blood, or both. You sigh and smile. Because now it's your mess again. You're sweeping behind the counter when your broom catches on something solid. Not a tile, not a bone. Something small, round, and metal. You kneel slowly, tilt your head, and there it is, half buried beneath a sticky smear of fig paste and shoe grime. A bronze coin. Old, worn smooth on one side. The kind no one misses, but everyone secretly hopes to find. You fish it out and wipe it clean on your sleeve. It has a faint image, maybe mercury, maybe just a badly stamped ear of barley, but it's coin enough to buy a crust of bread or a cup of vinegar wine. You glance around, but no one's looking. You close your fingers around it and pocket it silently. Your 4th, lost and found this month. 3rd coin. 1 ring. 1 tooth? You're not sure how the tooth ended up under the counter, and you're not entirely sure you want to know. Today's sweep has gone strange. The usual grit and stains are there, sure, but also new curiosities. A broken stylus near the oven, a feather from a messenger's cap wedged under a wine jug, and the wriggling half of a lizard tail still twitching. You lift the tail gently with your broom's bristles, carry it to the alley, and drop it near a crack in the stone. You figure its owner might want it back. You head to the storeroom next. Dark, humid, faintly sour. It smells like old flour and wet rope. You sweep in careful strokes, listening for the familiar scrape-scratch of rats, not just because you fear them, but because you know their rhythms. There's one that lives under the 3rd shelf. You've named him Felix. He's bold, gray, and has a chunk missing from his ear. He watches you from the shadow line, daring you to try and chase him. You never do. This is his territory too. Historians still argue whether rats were treated as pests or just fellow citizens in Roman food courts. Based on Felix's attitude, he certainly considers himself the latter. You flick a breadcrumb his way. He takes it and disappears. There's movement near the ceiling, a pair of geckos locked in a standoff over a beetle. You sweep around them. No reason to interrupt the drama. You've long stopped being surprised by what turns up underfoot. Last week, you found a clay amulet with a face carved into it smeared with soot, grinning like it knew something you didn't. Livia said it was probably a charm to keep ghosts away. You kept it in your pouch, just in case, but today, it's the coin that lingers in your thoughts. Not because of its value, but because of what it represents. All the tiny moments that slip away unnoticed. A merchant reaches too deep into his purse. A child sneaks a sweet and drops their good luck charm. A woman fumbles her ring after scratching her neck. These things vanish, swallowed by sand, by shadows, by you, and sometimes you give them back. Other times, you don't. You've got a little collection, tucked behind the broken crate in the broom closet. 5 coins, 2 rings, a wax seal, half a comb, 1 strangely beautiful glass bead that catches light like water, not stolen, just forgotten things remembered. The sweep near the wine cask reveals another oddity, a scrap of parchment, curled and stained, with a single name scrawled on it in hurried ink. Nestor, no address, no date, just the name. You stare at it. You don't know any nester. At least, not yet. You tuck it into your sleeve. Back at the main floor, the shadows are beginning to stretch. Afternoon has shifted toward early evening, and the crowd has thinned. A man in a green tunic nurses the last dregs of his wine. A woman hums softly while folding grape leaves behind the counter. No one watches you, so you sweep slowly. You let your broom trace gentle arcs, herding dust toward the door. You pause to nudge a dried olive pit into the pile. You whisper a quiet apology when your broom brushes a beetle too roughly. It survives. Marches on. In the far corner, you find the ring. Tiny, bronze, set with a dull red stone. Likely not worth much, but it catches the light just so, nestled in the grout. You lift it carefully. It's warm from the sun and sticky from the floor. You don't recognize it. You don't pocket this one. Instead, you walk to the front and place it on the counter beside the tips jar. Let someone else have the luck today. You finish sweeping. You take a step back and look at the floor, wavy streaks of sand where there were once crumbs, grease, dirt, mystery. Your work is invisible unless it's undone. But you see it. Every clean stretch is a sentence you've written in silence. You wipe your palms on your tunic and exhale. Somewhere behind you, Felix rustles his paper nest under the shelf. A beetle makes its slow way across the grout, dragging a crumb twice its size. The ring stays where you left it, unnoticed. For now, you return to the broom closet. Add the coin to your tiny collection. Nudge the bead into a better position so it catches the light. Pause for just a second, and then head back out, ready for the next spill, the next shuffle of sand, the next hidden story waiting beneath someone's careless foot. By the time you reach the temple steps, your arms are already aching again. The broom handle has begun to splinter in just the right spot to dig into your palm. You've wrapped it in linen twice. It still finds the soft part of your skin, like it wants to hurt you. You sigh, adjust your grip, and keep climbing. The Temple of Bonadea sits higher than you expected. Not tall, just perched. Built like a cat that's too dignified to come down. Watching the city through columns and incense haze, the air smells like rosemary, cracked stone, and something faintly metallic. You've never swept a temple before. The priests don't trust outsiders, especially ones with dust in their eyebrows and sandals held together with cord. But you've been called in today for a ritual correction. You don't ask questions. Not here. You just bring the sand. It's not your usual mix. This is ceremonial sand white, sifted, with a handful of red ochre mixed in for symbolism. You were handed the pouch with trembling fingers and firm instructions. Only sweep widdershins. Only with bare feet. Do not speak inside the cella. You try to remember what widdershins means. You think it's counterclockwise. You enter quietly, broom in one hand, sandals tucked under your belt. Trying not to look at the statue, it looms, eyes blank, arms open. Bonadea, goddess of chastity, healing, fertility, and, apparently, of dusty thresholds. The floor is already cleaner than most banquet halls, but the problem isn't cleanliness, it's balance. Someone tracked wine across the wrong threshold last night. A priestess slipped. The omens were disturbed. Now, you're here. You sprinkle the white sand in slow, careful arcs, brushing it into the grout lines like you're filling in sacred veins. The broom makes no sound here. The walls absorb everything. Even your thoughts feel quieter. You reach the back wall near the offering bowl when you spot it. A small, black smudge. It's not soot, not ink. It looks like ash, maybe burnt hair. You lean closer, touch it with your broom tip. It clings, sticky and stubborn. Behind you, one of the priestesses clears her throat. You freeze, and then sweep again widdershins, just like they said, smearing the ash into a red and white swirl until it disappears. You feel the tension lift slightly. The priestess says nothing, but you feel her nod. Historians still debate whether temple sweepers were considered sacred workers or just laborers with good timing. Based on your current status, barefoot, silent, tiptoeing through symbolism, you'd guess a little of both. Outside the temple proper is the portico, where you're allowed to breathe again. The wind stirs your hair. The regular sand returns no ceremony, just good, honest grit. You sweep near the entrance and notice something odd. A row of tiny symbols etched into the floor with a sharp tool scratched just beneath the surface layer of sand. They look almost like letters or numbers. You tilt your head. Livia once told you some temple floors are used like calendars, ritual markings, tracking festivals, eclipses, market days. You wonder if this is one, or if some bored acolyte just doodled while waiting for Jupiter to bless her livestock. You sweep carefully, tracing around the markings, preserving what you can. You know the difference between sacred dust and plain old street crud. Mostly, someone walks past an older man with gold rings and a too-long tunic. He glances at your broom and sniffs like he just stepped in you. You bow your head, sweep on. The last part of the job is the doorway, not just for appearances, but for protection. Every temple threshold has its own logic. Sweep the wrong direction and you invite back what was cast out. Sweep too vigorously and you erase the welcome. You never knew sand could be so dramatic. You finish with a swirl, just a little design, simple and round, like the ones you made behind the bathhouse. It's gone in seconds, wiped by a passing priest's foot, but you saw it. That's enough. You sit briefly on the lowest step, letting your feet cool on the stone. The pouch of sacred sand is lighter now. Your back hums with fatigue. Your hands ache. You still have the scent of ochre and incense clinging to your tunic. A bee lands beside you, crawls across a crack in the tile, then flies off again. You watch it go, thinking for a moment how nice it must be to leave behind no footprints at all. Then you rise. Your broom leans like it's sighing with you. You walk down the temple steps barefoot, not bothering to put your sandals on yet. You'll only need to take them off again soon. The street below hums with noise again. Cries of vendors, wheel ruts filled with water, a dog barking at a goat, the usual. You step back into it slowly, knowing that in the eyes of the gods, or at least the priestesses, your sweeps counted for more today than most people's prayers. You barely make it to the circus before the shouting starts. Not at you yet, but all around. Children running in circles, vendors yelling about honey cakes, handlers barking at jittery ponies. The air tastes like dust and roasted almonds, the kind of energy that smells exciting until you realize you're the one cleaning up after it. The games haven't started yet, but preparations are already chaotic. Today's not a race day, it's a civic parade, which in Roman terms means a grand show of wealth, symbols, and carefully choreographed chaos. And you've been summoned for a very specific reason. The floor, not the racetrack itself. Gods forbid they let a sand sweeper near that sacred loop, but the entryway, the grand corridor. The officials and processional performers will cross before stepping into the arena, the floor that must be smooth, flat, presentable. You arrive to find it. Not a pair of donkeys, clearly unaware of the occasion's formality, have left fresh gifts right at the threshold. A spilled amphora of wine is soaking into the grout like a blood offering. And to top it all off, there are broken rose petals everywhere. The floral tribute was dropped, no one knows by whom. And now the path looks less like a tribute to Roman civic pride and more like the aftermath of a clumsy wedding. You let out a slow breath and set down your bucket. This is not a one-broom job. You flag down another worker young, wiry, eyes like a cornered ferret, and together you start the process. One pushes debris with a wide brush, the other lays down clean sand. You take turns on the worst patches. It's all about pressure, angle, rhythm. Sweep too hard, and you gouge the decorative tiles too soft, and the donkey memory lingers. The wine, though, that's the trickiest. Red as pomegranate juice, sticky as a senator's promise. You grab your reserve, a cloth soaked in vinegar, and a handful of powdered chalk. Mix, rub, press, sweep, repeat. The scent nearly knocks you over, but slowly, painfully, the stain lifts. Historians still argue whether vinegar was used primarily for cleaning or as a humble antiseptic. Today, you confirm. It's both, and it's awful. A trumpet blares in the distance, one long, rising note. The signal. The procession is beginning. You scramble to finish. Sand goes down last spread and thin, even layers to soften footsteps, reduce slipping. and hide the patchwork of last-minute miracles. The young helper darts off. You stay, brushing the last few rose petals into a side pile, half hidden by a pillar, and then it happens. The doors open, a line of costumed officials enters, robes fluttering, gold glinting, sandals slapping the newly sanded floor like applause. Behind them, musicians. Behind them, children carrying wooden swords. And of course, miniature horses painted to look like mythical creatures. You step aside just in time for a man dressed as Mars to sweep past you, his armor clinking, his helmet slightly askew. He doesn't see you, but he does notice the sand. He slows for half a second, looks down, nods, keeps walking. That's it. No thank you. No coin. Just a nod. But to you, that nod means more than all the coin from the villa. You watch the parade wind down the corridor and disappear into the stadium light. And then, the aftermath. Immediately someone drops a wine cup. It rolls, clinks, leaks. You sigh and sweep again. Because this floor, it's never done. The helper returns. He saw the Mars nod too. Respect, he says, grinning. You grunt. Do you think, he asks suddenly, they'll ever let us sweep the actual track? You pause. Historians still debate whether track maintenance was handled by slaves, sweepers, or a rotating civic honor. But you've heard the rumors. A man once allowed to sweep the track before a major race, considered lucky sand. He died the next day, crushed by a cartwheel in the alley. You shake your head. Let the gods keep their loop. You say, we've got enough dirt to dance with right here. You step back, surveying your work. The floor gleams hidden beneath sand. Yes, but it gleams, a long ribbon of readiness. No one will see it. No one will remember it. But you do. And when the last flute note fades, and the crowd cheers behind you, you lift your broom like a soldier raising their standard. Victory. One sweep at a time. You're back in the alley behind the tavern when you spot it, scrawled low on the wall, just above the grime line where drunk men lean to retch, is a piece of graffiti so bold it actually makes you stop mid-sweep. It's a crude stick figure, drawn in black ash, with a disproportionately large nose and the words Livia Hearts Marcus, but Marcus Hearts wine curling beneath it. You blink, then laugh. Livia's going to love that. She claims she doesn't care what people write on walls, but last week, someone scribbled. Livia sweeps like she's chasing death, and she bought everyone honey cakes out of spite. Graffiti is everywhere in Rome. On walls, on stairs, even on the backs of public benches. It's gossip that never gets washed off. Your broom doesn't reach that high. And truth be told, you don't want to clean it. Graffiti tells the real story. You find more as you sweep deeper into the alley. One says, Caius was here, but not for long. Another, beware of dog, also his owner, a particularly elegant inscription, etched into plaster with a stylus, reads, to the girl in the green stola you smell like figs in revolution. You slow your sweeping, not to linger on the dirt, but to read. These words are the city's softest secrets. The sand soaks up the footprints, but the walls remember the voices. You reach the tavern's back entrance, where the garbage collects like stray gods. Someone's broken a plate. Again, sharp bits embedded in the corner grout like shark teeth. You sweep carefully bristles already fraying from yesterday's donkey adventure. Then you see it, written just behind the barrel. Sweepers know everything. You pause. It's true. Of course. You do. You've swept around slumped lovers and broken amphorae. You've overheard whispered arguments, curses muttered beneath breath, names dropped that should have stayed secret. You've seen which officials sneak into back rooms, which daughters pass notes to which bakers. You could write a history of Rome in sandal scuffs and spilled lentils, and sometimes, in your tired moments, you think maybe you should. Historians still debate how much street-level gossip influenced Roman politics, but anyone who's swept the alleys could tell you more than you'd believe. You sweep toward the far end now, where the gutter bends and collects all the runoff spilled wine, rainwater, and the occasional thing that might be a tooth. You push the slop gently into the side channel. It burbles toward the drainage ditch like a tired secret finally allowed to go home. Around the corner, two tavern girls are arguing, loudly. You catch snippets. He said, I looked like Venus, and then kissed Daria. Venus had standards, unlike you. You sweep around them with the solemn grace of someone pretending not to hear any of it. Behind them, more graffiti. This one newer, fresher. No sand can cover shame. You stare at it for a long time. You wonder who wrote it and who it was meant for. You sweep anyway. Not to erase it, sand doesn't stick to walls, but because sweeping gives you something to do while the world decides whether or not to fall apart. You find an old bronze hairpin near the edge of the steps, twisted, still warm from the sun. You hold it up. The girls don't notice. You set it gently on the wall beside the inscription. Maybe the wind will take it. Maybe not. Someone from inside the tavern shouts your name, not your real one. Of course, the one they use when they forget you're human. Broom. They yell, broom. There's a spill? You sigh. You answer anyway, because if you don't, someone else will come out and yell again, louder, ruder, more likely to throw something. Back inside, the floor is worse than usual. Someone dropped a bowl of stew. It's already congealed into a slow-moving puddle with chunks you don't want to identify. You sweep fast, efficient. The rhythm returns. Step, police. Sweep, scrape, step. You let your mind drift back to the graffiti. You think about writing your own. Something small. Something just for you. Maybe sand remembers. Maybe I was here. Or maybe just a spiral, low enough that only another sweeper would notice. You finish the stew mess. It's almost sunset. The broom is shedding bristles like autumn leaves. The light slants across the floor in golden bars. You step outside one last time, and with the last bit of dry sand just behind the barrel, you draw a small swirl. Then you walk away. You smell the rain before you hear it. That sour metal scent, sharp and earthy, rising off the rooftops in warnings. You look up and catch the first drops mid-step fat. Loud, and perfectly aimed to land square on your freshly sanded entryway. Of course, you scramble to pull the linen flap over the doorway, but it's already too late. The sand, your carefully scattered sand, is turning to slush in seconds. Little rivers form instantly between the mosaic tiles, dragging crumbs, ash, and at least 2 fig seeds toward the gutter like they've been waiting for this moment all day. Rain ruins everything, not because it's water, but because it moves everything else. You step into the street, barefoot. Now no sense soaking your sandals and watch the chaos unfold like a bad dream. You've already had twice this month. Someone's stall is collapsing under the weight of soggy cabbage. A runaway chicken sprints past, pursued by a child yelling words you didn't know children were allowed to use. You head for the drainage path near the bakery, where runoff always clogs first. Sure enough, it's a mess. Crushed grain, olive pits, something that looks like a wig or a dead bird, or both. You jam your broom into the muck and start scooping. The water is ice cold, full of stories. Bits of gossip float past actual notes inked on scraps. Wet sandals, the smear of a wine stain that might have been part of a declaration of love just an hour ago. Historians still argue whether Roman streets had functional drainage systems in every district or just the nicer ones. You don't need a historian. You just need to look down. Yours, not one of the nicer ones. You drag the sludge away from the storm arch. The broom heavy now, soggy, clinging like a jealous ex. You're ankle deep in what might be soup or might be yesterday's stew runoff. And every step sounds like a dying sponge. Livia finds you 20 minutes later, soaked to the bone and muttering about sand like it betrayed you personally. She has a broken basket and a very wet cat in her arms. Don't ask, she says, before you even can. You nod, sweep around her. The cat glares. You both work without talking. She takes the left side of the alley, pushing standing water into the central runoff. You handle the slope toward the forum. Somewhere behind you, someone's shouting about lost sandals. Another person slips and blames the gods. It's always the gods. Bet Mars never had to sweep floodwater. You mutter. Livia snorts. Mars is floodwater. He just lets everyone else drown. You're too tired to laugh, but it helps. A little. You start building sand dams, piling it into soft ridges to slow the water's advance. It works for a few minutes, until the next wave crashes down from the butcher's stall, carrying a truly upsetting amount of liver. Should we give up? Livia asks, not stopping. Probably. You answer, not stopping either. You think back to a time when you saw a marble-floored atrium completely flooded because a single drain got blocked by a sandal. A whole team was summoned. They brought linen, bronze buckets, and one terrified boy with a towel. Today, it's just you and Livia and one angry cat. And it's still enough, because here's the secret no one tells you about sweeping in Rome. The floor always wins. The rain always returns. The sand always runs out. But you show up anyway. You stand ankle-deep in chaos, wielding a broken broom like it's sacred, and you keep moving the world one handful at a time. Eventually, the rain slows, the sky stops spitting, the air turns warm again. You wring out your tunic at the hip, then turn back toward the tabernacle entrance. The sand there is gone, melted into pale veins of wetness and footprints. But somehow, in the doorway's edge, a little curl of dry sand remains. Just one. Just enough. You push it gently with your broom into the shape of a leaf. The cat meows, finally free from Livia's arms, and bolts down the alley. Livia shrugs. Guess he's clean now. You both laugh. This time really laugh. Bent over in the steam, rising off the stones. Everything is soaked. Everything smells like vinegar and regret. And yet somehow, you feel lighter than you have all day. The storm fades behind you. You watch the last of the gutter water trickle away, carrying stories you'll never hear, but you will sweep the place they came from. That's enough. The sun is back, mockingly bright now, like it forgot it ever vanished behind the clouds. Everything glistens in its aftermath. Roof tiles steaming, puddles shrinking into vapor, and the entire tabernacle floor glowing with that deceptive slickness that always gets someone hurt. And right on cue, a voice from the corner says, "Careful, this floor's cursed." You don't even look up. You know who it is? Old Vibius, the spice merchant with knees like rusted hinges and opinions like cracked amphorae, shuffles into view, tapping his cane on the floor. Tap, tap, thwack! On the third tap, the tip vanishes into the floor. You blink. Vibius stares down, confused. He yanks the cane back and thwacks again. Same result. The floor eats the cane tip like it's hungry for old man props. You step over quickly, broom in hand. Tap the tile. It's loose. Worse, it's hollow. You kneel. Brush the edge of the tile with your fingertips. Beneath the grime and sand, you spot a fine crack, running like a vein across the mosaic's edge. You tap it with the broom handle. It shifts, almost imperceptibly, but enough. Livia appears beside you. That's the tile. You look up. The one with the story. She nods. They say a magistrate dropped his scroll bag here, bent down to pick it up. Cane slipped into the crack. When he reached after it, the floor gave way. Gone. Just like that. You squint. Gone where? She shrugs. Basement. Sewer. Hell! You stare at the tile. There is no basement. You poke it again. This time, the tile lifts just enough for a dark gap to show beneath it. Not deep. Not dramatic. But deep enough to lose something small. A coin. A comb. A cane. Or a foot. If you're not careful, you rise slowly. Sweep a soft arc of sand around the tile's edge, like a warning ring. You won't fix it today. You're not a mason, but you can mark it. You can teach others to step around it. That's something. The idea that a floor might bite back. Honestly, it feels fair. You spend the next hour weaving new sand patterns around the rest of the floor. Nothing fancy. Just slight swirls, ridges along the grout, gentle textures to give traction. It's part performance, part safety measure, and part is something else, an unconscious ritual, like a prayer only your broom knows the words to. The regulars trickle in again. You catch them avoiding the marked tile without even thinking. They've heard the stories. The cane-eating floor, the vanishing man. One customer jokes, "That tile's cursed worse than my marriage," then slips slightly and grabs a pillar with both hands. You nod in sympathy. Keep sweeping. Historians still argue whether cursed floor spots were actual hazards or just clever worker folklore meant to avoid more dangerous repairs. You know the answer. It's both. Every floor tells its own story. You just have to know how to read the cracks. Near the door, you notice something odd. A trail of muddy footprints that leads in, circles once near the loose tile, then disappears. Not back out, just vanishes. Like whoever made them stopped existing or floated away. You don't like it. You sweep them away carefully, like erasing chalk from a school tablet. Livia watches you from across the room, still thinking about the tile. You nod. She walks over, crouches, runs a finger around the edge. "It's not just loose," she says softly. "It's listening." You blink. "What?" She grins. "Nothing. Just wanted to creep you out." You swat at her with your broom. She dodges, laughing, but you do glance back. Once, twice, and you don't walk over it again. Instead, you sketch a final swirl around the edge, one that bends just slightly, like a ripple around a stone. You don't know why, you just do it. The light shifts again. Golden, heavy, like honey sliding down a plate. You and Livia work the last few crumbs into the side pile. The broom's dragging now, the sand's low, your fingers are raw, but the tile is marked, the room is clean, and for now, the floor stays still. The sun leans low now, spilling warm gold across the cobbles like someone spilled a cup of light and just walked away from it. You can feel it brushing your shoulders soft, forgiving as you make your final round with the broom. Last sweep before sunset. There's a rhythm to it now. 1. Your hands follow without thinking. Left foot, drag. Right foot, lift. Sand shifts like dry silk across the mosaic. Each movement wipes the day behind you. Each stroke says, that happened, and now it's over. The taberna is quieting. One man snores in a corner with his head on the table. A woman at the counter counts coins with the soft click of bronze. A dog lies sprawled near the doorway, belly up to the breeze. The room smells like old wine, warm bread, and time. You sweep around the dog gently. He lifts one ear, doesn't move. You've done this 1,000 times, maybe more. But there's always something in the last sweep that feels different. Not better, not worse, just heavier. Like the broom's holding every conversation, every spill, every footstep pressed into the sand that day. And you don't rush, because this moment is yours. No one's watching, no one's ordering. You take your time, shaping the grains into a soft spiral near the hearth. It's not a message, not a signature. It's just a shape, a breath, a pause. Historians don't write about this part. They write about the emperors, the taxes, the marble. They write about the laws and the feasts and the public speeches. But they don't write about the people who turned chaos back into calm while no one was looking. They don't write about you. But the floor remembers. You sweep past the wine stain from earlier. It's faded now, dried and reduced to a faint blush in the grout. You don't scrub it out, you leave it. Some stories aren't meant to vanish. The broom's bristles are worn, softer than this morning. You can feel them catch just slightly on the mosaic edge. It hums in your palm, like a whisper, like the floor is telling you, thank you, or maybe see you tomorrow. You make one last pass by the cursed tile. Still there, still cracked, still waiting. You nod at it. Just a nod. No challenge, no fear, just respect. Livia's voice drifts in from the back, lazy with fatigue. You coming? Almost. You say. You finish the sweep. Step back. The floor's not perfect. Never is. There's still dust in the corners. A fig stem under the bench. Something suspiciously sticky behind the wine jug. But it's quiet now, settled, like a field after harvest, like a page after a story's told. You lean the broom in the doorway, tip the bucket to empty the last dry scoop of sand into a neat pile by the threshold. Someone will walk through it in the mornings. That's okay. You step outside. The air is cooler now. The sky is blushing. That brief pink between noise and night. The street shimmers wet from the earlier rain. The whole city exhales. You sit on the step. Stretch your legs. Let your feet dry. You've swept floors in temples, in kitchens, in courtyards full of angry birds and aristocrats. You've been invisible, blamed, ignored, and occasionally rarely nodded at like a person. And now, you get to stop just for tonight. You lean back on your elbows, watching the shadows grow long. The street lamps flicker to life with their sputtering flames, and the moon beginning to peer down like a sleepy coin lost in the sky. The floor behind you gleams with the day's final light. Your work is done. And now, the sand settles. The broom rests where you left it, gently leaning in the doorway, no longer bristling with urgency. Inside the taberna, the soft hum of evening begins. Cups clink faintly. Someone laughs, and the low scrape of a chair echoes like a lullaby through the dim. You lie there a little longer, eyes half closed, watching the shadows soften. The stones under you are warm from the day, cooling slowly like bread left out after baking. Even the cracked tile, the one with the story, the one that might bite, seems to breathe easier in the twilight. Above you, the sky deepens, shifting from bruised gold to velvet purple. And the city, chaotic and rude and full of spilled wine and lost buttons and broken sandals, grows quiet. Not empty, just slower, sleepier. Maybe someone else will sweep tomorrow, or maybe you'll return. As always, broom in hand, chasing footprints again. But tonight, the dirt has stopped moving. Tonight, you've left spirals in the sand where no one thought to look. Patterns that hold for just a breath longer before the wind stirs them away. And even if no one saw you, no applause. No name etched into stone. There's a moment now, between one breath and the next, where the world knows you were here. So rest. Let the dust settle. Let the night take over. You've swept enough for one lifetime.